Unless, thank you, Nat. Unless Nat or Myrna or Britton know of anyone else we should be waiting for, are we ready to get started? Okay, it is 6 o'clock on May 27th, and so I'd like to call this meeting to order for the HARC Historic and Architectural Review Commission for the City of Georgetown. So with that, Myrna, will you please take roll for attendance?
Yes, hi, good evening. Carolee Nunn, Michael Walton.
Will you guys please say here, just so we can have the verbal here?
I did, but I was on mute.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
Justine Curry.
Yes.
Steve Johnston. Terry Hyde.
Here.
Catherine Morales.
Here.
Pam Mitchell. Robert McCabe.
Okay, thank you so much, Myrna. Welcome everyone to this regularly scheduled Historic and Architectural Review Commission meeting. Commission members are appointed by the Mayor and City Council. The Commission is responsible for hearing and taking final action on applications for certificates of appropriateness based upon the City Council adopted downtown and Old Town design guidelines and the Unified Development Code. We will be considering the cases before us individually as follows. Staff will make a presentation of the case, and then I will give the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions to staff. After the staff presentation, the applicant or their representative will have up to 10 minutes to present their project, followed by questions from the commissioners. Once staff and the applicant have addressed questions from the commissioners, we will open the meeting for the public hearing. If you would like to speak on an agenda item, please wait until the public hearing is open for that item. Please raise your hand when that item is being discussed, and staff will call your name when it is your turn. Please clearly state your full name and address. Each person that has signed up to speak on the item will have up to 3 minutes. A speaker may allot their time to another speaker for a maximum of 6 minutes total. If a speaker wishes to allot their time to another speaker, please raise your hand and indicate so, along with the name and address and to whom you will be allotting your time to. Please remember that all comments and questions must be addressed to the commission. After everyone who has signed up has spoken, I will close the public hearing and provide a few minutes of rebuttal time to the applicant if they so choose. After that, I will ask the commissioners for additional questions to the applicant or to staff. Following this set of questions, I will ask the commissioners for a motion and a second, followed by deliberation. Then the commissioners will vote. If the applicant or a member of the public has questions or concerns following a vote on an agenda item, please communicate those to the recording secretary so the staff can follow up with you. Okay, with that, we are now moving to legislative agenda item C, which is consideration and possible action to approve the minutes from the May 13th, 2021 regular meeting of the Historic and Architectural Review Commission. Commissioners, do you have any questions or anything you need to know on that agenda item?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written. Catherine Morales.
Thank you, Catherine.
I'll second that, Terry Hyde.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, with that, Myrna, will you please call for whatever, call for the vote, I guess.
Yes, Michael Walton.
Yes.
Justine Curry.
Yes.
Terry Hyde.
Yes.
Catherine Morales.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Myrna. Okay, now we'll move on to agenda item D, updates from commissioner questions and comments from Sophia, but I don't see Sophia here. So is Myrna, Britton, Nat, any of you guys doing that, or are we moving on?
We have a couple of updates we want to go ahead and share with y'all as we get the meeting started. So we had been scheduled to do the design guidelines workshop with the city council on Tuesday. We got bumped from that workshop meeting agenda, and so we'll be going back to council, I believe, on June 22nd. So for everybody who is anticipating council feedback, that's going to have a little bit of a pause, not a problem, but just to update everybody. And then also our vice chair was officially appointed chair of HARC. So Faustine Curry is the mayor's appointment for the chair of HARC. And then also Lawrence Romero has been appointed to fill the vacant seat. He'll need to go through the process of board and commission kind of onboarding in order to be able to serve as a commissioner first. But those were the council appointments and kind of the updates from Tuesday. Otherwise, we're moving on with our design guidelines. We should have our consultants busy at work on that. And so we should have some updates for the commissioners in the next meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Britton. Okay, with that, we will move on to agenda item E, public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness. Britton?
Let me see if I can find the right program to share. All right, commissioners, this is Britton Bostic, the Downtown and Historic Planner. Thank you so much for being here tonight and hearing this case. This is one that you saw in your last meeting as a conceptual review. And so that did not have a public hearing. That was where the applicant had requested feedback from the commissioners prior to the public hearing. The public hearing has been properly notified with signposting and letters. And so tonight is the staff presentation, a public hearing, and then a request for a decision from the commissioners. And so this is the project at 701 South College Street. And this is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for new residential building construction and a 5-foot 0-inch building height modification to the required 20-foot 0-inch building height modification at a distance 3 feet from the side street or north setback to allow the building to be 25 feet tall at a distance 3 feet from the side street or north setback at the property located at 701 South College Street, bearing the legal description Block C Clamps Addition. And so there are a couple of pieces to this, commissioners. So normally what we bring before you is a decision that just requires HARC review. This application has two pieces. What I'll be covering tonight is what the HARC review portion is. There is an accessory structure currently on the property. It's not historic. It was constructed in the 1980s. It's not identified on our historic resource survey. The applicant is proposing to remodel that structure, which is currently in various states of disrepair, needs siding replacement, etc. They're proposing to match that to the infill structure if approved. And so that part, because it's a non-historic structure, is staff review. But what you're being asked for tonight is a brand new home, essentially, in that property at 701 South College. The applicant had initially requested, and what y'all reviewed last time was a 5-foot building height modification. Based on HARC's feedback, the applicant has removed that from their request. So the building height modification is no longer requested. We did provide notification for it. So that is part of what staff is presenting, but just to begin with saying that that's not part of the request that the applicant is ultimately asking for based on HARC's feedback in the conceptual review. So this is the front elevation of the proposed structure. It's a 2-story structure that I'll loosely call modern Victorian. So we have a lot of Victorian period structures in our historic district. This would be a sort of modern interpretation of that with fiber composite siding, vinyl windows, but in that kind of traditional 2/2 appearance with single hung, some porches with wood railings. The applicant had in their conceptual review asked for HARC's feedback on metal railings. And so based on the commissioner's feedback in that conceptual review, they've changed to request wood railings only. So this would have a stucco covered chimney, asphalt shingle roof, etc. And so this is located just to the north of the Hammerlin Center campus. And if we go to the aerial map, you can see it's a low priority structure on the site currently, surrounded by a mix of different priorities of structure, different ages, different styles, different times of construction. And so this structure that exists today was approved for demolition by the HARC commissioners in July of last year, July 2020. We went through a process of looking at the history of the property, and that included going back to the platting of the subdivision And then also seeing that the property was just barely visible on the 1916 map, and then kind of made its way through the 20s and through the 1940s. There was a lot that didn't change on the site. We may or may not have had an additional structure on the site in 1940. I didn't have that in any photos. The photos do show that this structure was built before 1886. So it was definitely one of our older residential structures. And you can see at this point in time, in 1886, that was the far east side of town. This was a part of Georgetown that took a while to develop, but by 1934, the next time we can see it in photographs, it was still a fairly large lot, but a lot of homes had begun to develop around it. You can see those homes beginning to appear in the photographs. By 1964, the area had pretty well developed to where it is today. So this is an area where you have a mix of homes from the 1800s through the 1960s, but usually kind of stopping around the 1940 time period. And by 1974, this is a very blurry photo. I apologize, but we see that the site was pretty much as it is today, with the exception of that accessory structure. In 1984, the house underwent a remodel process. So this is kind of an interesting and somewhat rare photograph of a house under remodel when that historic resource survey was done in 1984. And so what had happened in the 1984 remodel is that it looks like the original siding, the windows, the porch columns, the porch itself, some of the roofing, it looks like that had all been removed. And so a lot of the historic fabric had been removed by 1984. And we catch that in another photo. You can see replacement windows, a new front door, new porch columns. The house set very low to the ground. And so today it has a lot of deterioration. So kind of a combination of the loss of historic material and also the state of the foundation being on top of the ground essentially for all of this time. There's not a lot of historic fabric that's going to be able to be salvaged with the demo. And so that was part of why the commissioners approved the demolition request. And there was some later additions, not historic, not necessarily too compatible with the historic character. Those were done with the siding and windows that were used for the replacement. So that brings us to the site today. The applicant is proposing to site the new house roughly where the existing house is. We did look at kind of shifting the house over to not require the building height modification. So what you saw in the conceptual review, that dimension at the very top where it says 18 feet, that was initially 15 feet. So they have proposed to move it over on the site, putting it closer to that existing accessory structure. They do meet floor to area ratio and impervious cover requirements. Here are a couple of, whoops, that should say floor plans. I apologize. So here's kind of the proposed floor plan. The second floor will be a little bit smaller than the first floor. And that will allow them to have some covered porches on the first floor and then also a couple of upper floor railed porches. And so you can see the front and right elevation, or essentially what you would see from the street. And then the rear elevation, I believe that faces Walnut Street, and then the left side, which faces internally to the site. And so part of our Unified Development Code requirements are that accessory structures are limited in size as to how big they can be. And so, however, if they are constructed as an addition, that will work out. What we're working around here and what the applicant had been proposing, commissioners, was to retain the existing accessory structure on the site that was built before some of our zoning limits on that. So they wanted to keep that structure, but replace the siding and put windows in that would match the new structure they're wanting to build. That would be connected by a breezeway. What they have proposed in this request before you tonight, we had a discussion in the conceptual review about whether or not to include the railings for the breezeway. They have asked to be able to include the railings, although they may not ultimately put them on. So basically asking for approval of either case, both with railings being installed and without railings being installed. And so this slide shows what the proposed design would be with the railings. And then this slide shows the proposed design with the railings removed. And so that had been what the commissioners that initially expressed as their preference. But now you have the opportunity, and I'll go back. Now you have the opportunity to see the elevation proposed with the railings and then also the elevation proposed without the railings. And so just to kind of wrap up the proposed design, this is the guest house, they're calling it, or what is currently an accessory structure that ultimately would be attached when construction is finished, having that breezeway connection to the main structure. And then the proposed materials are materials we pretty frequently see for new construction in Old Town: asphalt shingle roofs, and then kind of windows that are, they're a newer window product, the vinyl, but they're kind of reflecting traditional elements, and then using a lapped siding that would be a fiber cement rather than a wood. One of the questions that the commissioners had in the conceptual review is, could we see a little bit more of the site context? So we've provided some additional photos showing that's where the house is now. The new house would be roughly in that same location, just scooted over to the right a little bit as seen from this view. And then here's a view from College Street looking north. So this is kind of as you approach the house from the south. And then here, oh, I apologize. And then here it is from East 7th Street. This is a very large lot. And so the house, rather than being centered in the lot, would be toward the western side of the lot. And then there had been a question too, kind of what was the relationship to the two-story historic structure? And this shows some of that street view. And then here we have another photo kind of showing where the blue house is. That's approximately where the new house would be. And then you can see that two-story green residential structure there in the far right of the photo. And so when staff reviewed the application in its final requested form, again, we have noticed for the building height modification, that was, the notices went out the day before the conceptual review. So we wanted to be consistent with that notification, but the applicant has removed that from their request tonight. And so staff has found that the application complies with the applicable approval criteria. No signs are being proposed, and so that one did not apply. When staff did evaluate the building height modification, we found that it would not have complied. And so based on that finding and the commissioner's feedback, that's been removed. And so 3 signs were posted, 36 letter mail. Staff has not received any comments either in favor or opposed to the project. And so staff is recommending approval of the request for residential infill. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to be available for questions. I'm not sure if the applicant has been able to join us yet.
Thank you so much, Britton. Yes, I think the applicant is here. Before we move on, I did want to just recognize that a couple more of our commission members are here. Pam Mitchell, one of our alternates, has jumped on, and Lawrence Romero, our newly appointed commissioner, are on here. So thank you both for joining on. We appreciate it. Okay, so moving on. Applicant, I am grateful you're here. Thank you. And so just wanted to offer you the opportunity if you wanted to provide any additional information.
The only thing I kind of wanted to say, and I'm not sure if I made it clear if it even matters, but as far as the windows go, in the elevation, it shows these panes on the windows, which we may use those, but it also may just be without panes. And I wasn't really sure how to show that so much as just say it. So I guess I want either option there too, if that's something y'all also decide on.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Britton, are the windows something that we will need to discuss as we move forward?
Yes, and so windows are generally considered to be a character defining feature. So the way that they're being shown in the elevations is essentially a 2/2 configuration. You would have 2 window panes up top and 2 window panes down below. So if you imagine what's called a single hung window, it's one where you can slide the bottom portion up and down to open and close it. That would have 2 panes and the top would have 2 panes. What Ms. Helgerson is communicating is that this is one of the design options, but they may also want to choose a design that would have 1 single pane up top and 1 single pane down below, so you wouldn't have that center vertical divider. And in that instance, you would probably see a 2/2 more traditionally on a Victorian home. This is not a Victorian home and it's not meant to be a replica. We do often see windows for new homes in Old Town come in with a request for that 1/1 window design. So that is something the commissioners have seen and approved previously, and happy to help with any questions about the difference between that if the commissioners are interested. So if the commissioners want to approve with kind of either window design, it would be great to have that in the motion that you make. Or if you would really think it's needed to settle on one particular design and that's part of your approval, it would be great to make that clear in the motion as well.
Great, thank you, Britton, and thank you, Pam, for sharing that with us. Okay, at this time, commissioners, what questions, comments, thoughts do you all have? I know we have looked at this project a couple of times, and so you may feel like you're ready to move forward, and if so, we can do that.
Faustine, it's Michael. I have two.
Hey, Michael, sure.
Hopefully easy. So if we have the 2 pane windows, they're still going to be openable, correct?
Yes, so that, whoops, going a little fast. I thought I had like a clear window image. I'm sorry. So they're proposed to be the single hung operable windows. And Ms. Helgerson, if you have a clarification for that, please let us know. I don't want to misspeak.
No, you're correct. How you described it was exactly right. They will still open just the same. They just won't have kind of the little plastic piece separating it that we're calling pane. Could go either way on that part, but they'll function the exact same way.
Okay. And Britton, you clarified the wood railing. Is that true for the breezeway as well?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, with that, we will open the discussion for a public, open for a public hearing. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. If you will state your name and address clearly, and then if giving your time to someone else, please sign up and indicate who you're giving your 3 minutes to. So with that, Nat, Myrna, do we have anyone that would like to speak during the public hearing?
Yeah, but Faustine, I'm sorry, I just had one more.
Oh,
Is that okay?
just a point of clarification, staff. Can Michael ask his question now, or do we need to close the public hearing and then he can discuss further?
After the public hearing is held, then we can go back to commissioner discussion.
Very good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have anyone that would like to speak during the public hearing?
No one in the chat space. No one has contacted me indicating a desire to speak, and I don't think they've contacted Myrna either.
Great, thank you, Nat. Okay, with that, we will close the public hearing. And at this point, I'll ask for any additional questions or comments from the commission. So Michael, if you are ready, if you could ask us your question.
Yeah, it might sound strange, but I just want to ask the applicant, I think you made it clear last time, but I just want to confirm, this is going to be your primary residence? You're going to live here?
Yes, we are.
Okay. That's it.
Okay, great. Any other questions from commissioners? If you guys will give me a clue, that would be awesome. No or yes?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, with that, I will request a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve as presented by the applicant. And per Britton's request, both versions of the windows and both versions of the breezeway.
Thank you, Michael. Do I have a second?
Catherine Morales, I'll second.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, any further discussion? Great. Myrna, if you will call for a vote, please.
Michael Walton,
Yes.
Faustine Curry,
Yes.
Terry Hyde,
Approve.
Catherine Morales.
Approve.
Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Pam, thank you so much for bringing your project to HARC and for working with us as we learn more about your project and all that you're bringing to the table. We really appreciate it. So thank you so much. Okay, with that,
Thank you very much.
sure. With that, we'll move to agenda item F, presentation by staff on building lighting, sharing fixture and lighting types, illumination styles, and lighting terms.
Britain again. So commissioners, I'm really excited tonight for a couple of reasons. One, we have our very first historic preservation intern, Shane Warren, presenting to you tonight. Shane has done a lot of work on this presentation and the information provided. The reason that we want to do this is a couple of things. One, when you review new commercial construction, commercial infill construction, lighting can play a role in that building design, either through the fixtures or the way the building's proposed to be illuminated. We don't see a lot of really fancy illumination styles yet, but they could be incoming in the future. And so we wanted to make sure that you were prepared for that evaluation, wanted to make sure that you had good vocabulary to be able to have those discussions. Lighting is a topic that the commissioners have brought up previously. It's one that we have discussed. And so we wanted to just be able to share some good vocabulary and some technical information so that y'all have a good basis for those discussions. The other thing that we want to do is we have annual training that we do because we're a certified local government. And so this can be on a variety of topics related to historic preservation. As we've been doing the virtual meetings, sometimes your meetings run a bit long and we want to be sensitive to everybody's time, but when we do have a shorter meeting agenda, we want to work in some training opportunities because they're part of what we report to this Texas Historical Commission as part of your annual training so that we can stay in good standing with our certified local government program. And so another piece to this, and I think one that's very relevant today, we are updating our downtown and old town design guidelines. And one of the things that our consultant identified when they reviewed our guidelines was that we needed to add more content on lighting. This is going to be primarily for commercial buildings. Our Unified Development Code does not require a certificate of appropriateness for light fixtures installed on 1 and 2 family structures, but we do have a lot of Unified Development Code requirements around lighting, including shielding lights so that we prevent things like glare, a definition that Shane's going to provide in his presentation. So as we go forward with the applications and projects that y'all review, as we go forward to the next phase of our design guidelines, which will be here in a couple of weeks when our consultant gets that next draft back to us and we're doing final checks, one of the things that you're going to see is that there's more content on lighting. And that, to some extent is saying fixtures need to fit with building styles, be compatible with that. But also, having this revolving or rotating kind of animated multicolor light spinning on buildings is maybe not compatible with our historic district. So Shane, thank you so much for doing this work. I've been looking forward to this presentation. And then once Shane finishes, we'll be able to answer any questions the commissioners have. So Shane, over to you.
Well, thank you for that informative introduction, Britton. I'm happy to finally meet the commissioners in a live Zoom call. So hello to you all. I'll jump into the presentation so we can try to keep the meeting nice and short. Let me see if I have permission. Yeah, I do. Okay, cool. I was seeing if I have permission to share my screen. Here it is. And let me just present it. All right, here we go. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about building lighting. And so to summarize the agenda for this presentation, first I'll be going over some common metrics that might be used when discussing lighting regulations or sort of quantifying different properties about light. Then I'll go into some definitions related to lighting, some terms that you'll probably use a lot when discussing lighting. I'll talk about some building illumination solutions to any aesthetic issues that might come across. And these solutions aren't for hyper-specific problems. It's just generally, okay, if a fixture looks ugly or you have some kind of problem, these are solutions that'll often come up. Then I have a special deep dive into light pollution because I heard that at least one or two commissioners had a special interest in light pollution. And it's also a topic that I personally think deserves its own deep dive. And then I'll just recap everything and leave the floor open to questions and discussion. So now we're going to go into the metrics. So first you have wattage. This measures the amount of energy used. Light sources can have different wattage for the same level of aesthetic effect. And so watts are really about environmental and utility costs, not the subjective aesthetic effect that people see. Then you have lumens. And so lumens are basically a measure of the total amount of light radiated out. They're a component of light pollution, but they're not the best metric of perceived intensity of a single light source. I'll get into the better metrics next. Lumens are about the contribution it has to the overall profile of the amount of light that a city is generating. So then we have footcandles. We're in the metric system, so instead of lux, we're in the customary system. So instead of lux, we have footcandles. It measures the amount of light per square foot. And this pertains the most to the visual effect out of all of the metrics. And so this graphic on the right is really what helped me understand the difference. Lux is like the metric equivalent of footcandles. And as you can see, this one light source has 1,000 lumens right here. But the amount of lux depends on how much brightness you see per specific unit of space. And now we have like a real example here. So this parking lot on the left probably has more footcandles because each specific square foot has a lot more light on it. And then this parking lot on the right has but residential area has a lot less footcandles because, as you can see, there's a lot less space, especially as you get further out to this boundary. And footcandles are also what's referenced in the UDC. And so now we have a metric of color temperature. Color temperature is about the source of the light, more so than what the light illuminates. And so on the lower end, you have more red lighting, looks more like a candle. On the higher end, you have more like blue lighting that looks more like a sky. And then right around in the middle, around the 5,000 Kelvin mark, you have an equivalent of sunlight, which looks white to our eyes. And so I'm going to give some real examples so you can contextualize this in the context of looking at properties. So these lights have a lower color temperature. They're redder. These are Christmas lights. And then these outdoor lights down here probably have a higher color temperature. And so again, the lower the temperature, the redder, the higher the temperature, the bluer, and then white typically is somewhere in the middle. So now here's another term that I think is going to be especially useful for you guys. It's the color rendering index. And so while color temperature is about the source of the light, the color rendering index is about what the light illuminates. And so the higher the color rendering index, the more the true color of the object will come out. And this is regardless of color temperature and all those other metrics. So as you can see with this picture of an apple, same color temperature, same light source, or same other metrics, but the better the CRI, the more you can actually see what the apple is meant to look like. And the baseline for this, the 100 for the CRI, is going to be sunlight. And here you have a picture of downtown Georgetown in the middle of a nice sunny day. And so if an artificial light source has a really good CRI, the visual character of the building is going to be retained during the night instead of the light source making it look like an entirely different color. And so that's why it pertains especially well to historic districts. Now we have some definitions. A fixture, it holds the light source. It can be decorative, or it can just be for the purpose of holding the light with no intended aesthetic effect. And they're architectural components, and oftentimes might be the source of aesthetic complaints or conflicts because they can be very visual. And now we have accent lighting. And so lighting can be generally split into 3 different types, although in practice, light sources can be any combination of them. And so the first type is accent lighting. It's decorative. With contemporary lighting, it's usually these narrow strips. And the light doesn't necessarily illuminate anything. It's just that the source itself has a sort of decorative effect, as you can see in this building. Then you have ambient lighting. And so ambient lighting is lighting that is about illuminating the general area. It's Oftentimes, if you in colloquial discourse, like if people are talking about lighting, they'll usually say ambient lighting, not one of the other two terms, even if they mean accent lighting or another kind. But to be more specific, ambient lighting is when you're worried about illuminating the general area. And as you can see in this picture, you can't really tell where the light source is because it's about what is illuminated. It's not about what the light source itself. And then you have task lighting. And so task lighting is done for a specific job, whether it's working at a desk or safety while working on utility poles in the middle of the night. And the most typical example is a desk lamp, even over an oversized desk lamp like this one. And something that distinguishes task lighting is that the light is off when the task is done. It's just on when you're trying to do something. And so now I'll jump into some solutions to common aesthetic problems. And so just to give some context, we often want historic buildings to be visible at night, but contemporary fixtures and lighting can sometimes distract from the aesthetic effect or not look like an actual historic building. And so one way that we can work around this is putting fixtures on the ground and then angling them up to illuminate a building. So here we have an example of this church. And the beam, as you can see this diagram, it has these fixtures on the bottom that are shining up. The beams are invisible, the building is illuminated, the fixtures can easily be hidden or at least less visible. And these can potentially be powered in a green way, like solar power with like a little battery attached so that they can work at night. Then you have a very low-tech solution. You can simply paint the fixture to match an existing building color. It's inexpensive. If somebody asks for forgiveness instead of permission, it's an easy remedy to apply. And it also has a maintenance effect. It can protect the fixture from deterioration, rust, etc. And then we have another low-tech solution, which is a tall lamppost. The fixture itself is a decorative addition. It's very pedestrian oriented. It helps people walk in and around a building or a space. And it's most appropriate for shorter structures because like a 200-foot tall lamppost isn't going to really help anybody. And here you can see a nice picture of it right here. And then you have cove lighting. It was hard to find a good example of this applied to exterior facades. But basically you can seal the light source behind some sort of decorative element or extension of a wall. And this CVS, it's hidden behind a cornice. And so that way, the fixture itself is hidden, and instead you see the decorative addition that could potentially be more historically, architecturally, aesthetically appropriate. And then, of course, we have shielding, something that's explicitly referenced by our UDC. It prevents light spillover. It can lower light pollution. And perhaps the most important thing it does is it just directs the light where you want it to go. And I'll get more into that when we talk about light pollution, which is coming up next. So light pollution, it's a term we use a lot, but it can actually be split into separate subtypes. And it's good to know these terms when we're talking about different issues that lighting can cause. Light that like encroaches on the property of others, like a school into a residential area or one neighbor to another, that's light trespass. As you can see, this gentleman is very angry about this neighbor's light shining directly into his window. It's trespassing. Then we have glare. It's strong light that can obscure visibility. Most of the literature I've read on this is in reference to people driving, but it also just has a subjective aesthetic effect that you can see right here. Then there's light clutter, which is an excessive grouping of lights. The sports stadium picture, I think, explains it pretty well. And then we have environmental light pollution, which is really interesting. So it's light that harms animals, plants, or the biosphere in some way. For example, infrared light can disrupt natural tree leaf cycles by extending the amount of time that trees have leaves on them. Lighting can also disrupt bird migration patterns, and if lights are too bright, they can actually cause birds to crash into buildings by temporarily blinding them, and that can create a sanitation issue with dead birds. It doesn't look good, and it's very sad for the birds, and we want to avoid it. And so light pollution solutions. The biggest thing is just picking the right fixture and light type. You want a fully shielded light source that makes sure that the light is only illuminating the area where you want it and when you want it. And so we have this diagram right here. The best light fixtures have this shielding that shines the light directly where you want it to go. It doesn't encroach anywhere, doesn't like reflect up into the light and sky and off of the clouds. Then you have this infographic of like acceptable and unacceptable light fixtures that was pulled from the Dark Sky website. And again, generally the acceptable ones are really good at directing the light where you want it to go and preventing light from spilling over into the general composition of light in the city. And then you have motion sensing. This is often done on residential properties, but there's no reason it can't be done elsewhere. It only turns on when it's needed, usually when a person's walking by or working on something. It can reduce the impact of bird populations and it saves energy. So it's a pretty win-win solution. So now we have a recap of lighting. So lighting can be separated into 3 function types that sometimes overlap. Accent lighting for decoration that's coming from the light source itself, ambient lighting for illuminating objects in the area, and task lighting, which is done to enable people to do specific jobs. Lighting can be measured in energy used or watts, total light output or lumens, intensity or foot candles, the color of the light source, which was usually referred to as color temperature, and how effectively the light retains the visual character of objects, which is the color rendering index or CRI. There are multiple solutions for successfully illuminating buildings, most of which are fairly low cost and can even be implemented after the fact if an owner does an inappropriate addition of light fixtures. And light pollution in particular can be prevented by using properly shielded fixtures and only illuminating where and when light is actually needed. So that's the conclusion of my lighting presentation. And now I'm leaving the floor open for discussion or questions or concerns from HARC members.
Thank you so much, Shane. Thank you for the presentation, and we're so glad to see you in person, and we'll be excited to work with you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, what comments or questions do you have for Shane?
I actually have a question on our jurisdiction on lighting is what? Like is anytime somebody brings a lighting change, or is it only with a new building, a new structure? And if somebody has lights that are really, really, really bright, what's the recourse?
I think Britton can answer that question.
I'll take that one. Thank you so much, Commissioner Mitchell. So a few different pieces, I think, to the answer. When we have residential buildings, so homes, basically, single family or duplexes, the UDC does not require that lighting be reviewed through any special process. It's not required for a certificate of appropriateness. Those are in the category of exceptions. But for commercial buildings, we not only have kind of a lot more review there, but that's something that we not only get into style, but we get into what are the foot candles. So when Shane was sharing what is the intensity of the light, that's something that we require get measured as part of the process. So if a commercial building that's commercial infill comes in, and brand new building in the downtown or even in Old Town, one of the things that y'all would have the opportunity to look at then, and I should say it's not always something that's been completely thought through at that point in the project, not to say that it can't be, but sometimes the proposal hasn't kind of been finalized yet for what that lighting looks like. If it comes in with brand new commercial building that's part of HARC review, that can be one of the aspects of the building that y'all review. You would be looking at the fixture in terms of, does the fixture style match with the building style, and is it consistent with the character of the historic overlay district that it's in? If somebody has an existing commercial building and they want to add lighting to it in one of our historic overlay districts, that's something that the UDC lays out as HPO approval or administrative level approval. That's not something that we see very often. I will tell you, most buildings are either already have their lights or something like that. On commercial buildings, when lighting is either being proposed as part of a new building, and our code requires new buildings to have a certain amount of lighting. You have to illuminate main entrances, you have to illuminate parking areas. There's a couple of other things. So our code says, here's what commercial building lighting has to look like. It has to be shielded, and it has to meet foot candle requirements at the property line. And so where that gets captured is usually not in the HARC review. It usually gets captured in a technical review as part of the site development plan. So whereas y'all are often just looking at the fixtures, or let's say someone says, we're going to have this new building and it's going to have light and the light's going to shine up on the building and it's going to provide a color spectrum that's going to rotate through every shade of green. That would be the time when y'all would say yay or nay on that. And that's why we're trying to get some additional content in the design guidelines around lighting. When we're looking at the light intensity and that getting measured, that's part of what has to be provided for a commercial site development plan. It does happen that somebody might install lighting after the fact, or there might be another situation in which lighting is not evaluated in that process. So then it's a matter of did the project go through the right application process or not? Does it have the right permits or not? And then it becomes, is it a matter of needing to go through the application process? Is it a code compliance issue? There are a few different ways that that might come up. Our goal is to make sure we're catching things early in the project design so that they are fully reviewed through the correct project application process. And so that also we have a clear understanding from the beginning what the impacts of light will be. Otherwise, if it's an after the fact thing, or if the building's already there, additional lights are installed, et cetera, that may be something that goes through a code compliance process.
Thank you. That was very helpful. And one last question is there today, or has there been any thought of implementing some, I don't know how you would do it. It may be the sort of the average foot candles in a neighborhood or across Georgetown, like, sorry, Kat. Just, I guess the question is there any discussion or interest across Georgetown of keeping it appropriately dark, so safely dark? I think when Sun City was being developed, I understand that there was a big effort to make sure that that there was a dark sky concept that was adopted by everyone. Is there any thought about trying to transition to that type of structure within Georgetown and the overlay districts over a period of time?
That's a great question. And so some cities have adopted kind of the International Dark Skies Association initiative and have rules on the type of lighting fixture and how it's shielded that are in compliance with that very specific set of criteria. You see that a lot in hill country communities these days. Cities anywhere from Dripping Springs to Dripping Springs I'm aware of, but maybe struggling with a couple of others. Just recognizing the importance of dark skies. That's not a specific initiative that the city of Georgetown has adopted yet. I think because we're not considered to be like super close to the hill country, not saying that it wouldn't be an important step. What we do have are light shielding requirements that are fairly reflective of those dark sky goals. I think what we want to be able to do moving forward, and one of the reasons we wanted to bring this up, since it is a topic that the commissioners have brought up with staff and y'all have discussed, we want to make sure that our design guideline policies are consistent with our Unified Development Code. We want to make sure that they're giving y'all the review tools that you need for incoming commercial development in particular. And then we want to make sure that everybody has this good vocabulary to use so that we're able to have these discussions really successfully as new projects come in, and we're looking at all of the different ways that these could potentially impact our historic districts. It's really easy to just look at the siding materials or the windows and say, well, that's going to have the greatest impact. But I think what we're learning as we move forward is that lighting is also having impacts that we want to be able to successfully address. So I don't know that the city has undertaken a dark skies initiative as a clear policy goal, but I think our shielding requirements and the way that we're trying to make sure we're staying up to speed on all of this is at least going a similar direction right now.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I will just edit just a quick note is the building across the street from me was redone and the lights that they have are so bright that my street light doesn't turn on anymore. So it thinks it's daylight. It's so bright. So
Thank you, Pam, for the comment, and I'm sorry about that, and for the questions. And thank you, Britton, for the explanation.
Yeah, thanks, Britton.
So I have a couple of comments and questions. First of all, thank you very much, Shane. That was very, very interesting. And I've brought up dark skies many times, and I've also complained about almost every single light that we've ever reviewed on a commercial property because I think it really doesn't fit dark sky. Some of the neon lights on some of the newer, I know they're not supposed to be neon, but they look as if they were neon. So the one thing I would make sure is that as we are allowed to review lighting as it concerns commercial properties, even if we can't do it on residential properties, that people really understand what they're proposing. So many commercial buildings, they might even have footpath lighting, but it is not shielded down enough so that when you're walking on that footpath, it's actually glaring in your eyes and you can't see the footpath that it's meant to be illuminating. And just as you alluded to on one of your PowerPoint slides, the biggest problem with some of these street lights, the glare is so great, it catches your eye, not the stop sign that's right there, but you're looking up at the bright light in the sky. So any way that we can have more restrictions on that would be great. But is there any chance we can add residential lighting, at least in the areas where we're having discussions, that they are held to a stricter standard, even if it isn't rolled out throughout Georgetown?
We have the opportunity to look at lighting in the design guidelines, but since residential, let me say this correctly, since light fixtures on residential properties, meaning 1 and 2 family properties, so a multifamily property would be different. Multiple units on the same lot is multifamily. That would be considered more like commercial. On the 1 and 2 family structures, that would be something that we'd have to have a change to the Unified Development Code to be able to review. So that may be a little bit longer kind of process to see if we can get that added. On commercial, that's something that we can kind of address and pay attention to, I think, a little bit more expediently, because sometimes the UDC amendments will take a little bit more time. What I do want to do is make sure I'm working with our consultant successfully on the design guidelines update. They had brought lighting up as part of their assessment and said, we think that you need more content. So we've been working on that. Part of what I think I need to be able to highlight for y'all when we come back with that next draft is to share exactly how our design guidelines are written to address that and to see if that is meeting the expectations while also kind of staying consistent with our development code.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much, both of you all. Okay, what other questions do we have on lighting and Shane's presentation for us?
Shane, is this available? Is this in the, I didn't click on it. I saw it was going to be educational, but is this in the meeting notice information, this deck?
In the meeting notice, I'm not sure about that, but I think me and Britton talked about making plans to make this presentation available on either Georgetown's website or through some other public forum.
So it should be posted with the agenda, but if you'd like us to email it to you directly, we're happy to do that.
No, if it's with the agenda, I saw the item, I just didn't click on it, so I don't.
It should be, but let me know if it's not.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing it on the agenda, but I might have missed it. But I would love an emailed copy, Britton, if you have a chance.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. We can get that sent out.
Something else I wanted to say, I was trying to find the unmute button in response to Commissioner Morales' questions and concerns. You were talking about how some commercial attempts to illuminate footpaths result in glare, and like some attempts to illuminate stop signs end up obscuring the stop signs. So something I didn't put in the presentation because I didn't come across that specific problem, but they might want to look into accent lighting because that way you're drawing attention to where people want to be looking without making this overbearing effect. Like that's often done on stop signs, for example, in high risk areas. And so there could be lighting, like a small strip on the actual footpath that doesn't need to be intense at all for people to say, hey, there's a footpath here.
Good suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, with that, I think that's all we have on the agenda today. I appreciate all of your input and feedback and ideas and questions. The best meetings are meetings when people are discussing. And so thank you all so much for being a part of that and making that happen. With that, if no one has anything else.
Just another great job, Faustine. I'll stop saying this, but I know this is new, so good job.
Thank you, Pam. I appreciate it. Okay, with that, I will call for a motion to adjourn.
Catherine Morales, I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Catherine. In a second.
I'll second. Terry Hyde.
Thank you, Terry. Myrna, will you call for a vote, please?
Michael Walton,
Yes.
Faustine Curry,
Yes.
Terry Hyde,
Yes.
Catherine Morales.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks. Bye.